Welcome yet to another lesson delivered to you by myself, Mr. Imran, from one-to-one-tutor.co.uk, the home of mathematics. Okay, right. Today's lesson, as you can see from the title, is going to be about multiplying decimal numbers. Okay, now the lesson's been taken from the questions and been taken from, again, the Trusted Mathematics, the Basic Skills, and this is, we call it the Apple Book. Okay, now I'm at exercise 10 and page 60. Okay, exercise 10, page 60, and it's the Basic Skills book. Okay, right. Now, let's have a look at one of the first questions. You have 6.7 times by 4. Let's make that decimal point nice and fat there so you can see it. Okay, now, in this number here we have a decimal number and a whole number. And the rule that we have for multiplying decimal numbers is count. You're going to count what? Count the number of decimal places in the question. That means both parts of the question. In the question, okay, number of decimal places is talking about the number of positions after the decimal point and not the number of decimal points itself. That's a decimal point, and that's the first decimal place, for example. Okay, now in this above question, how many decimal places do we have? Well, we've got one decimal point, so that gives you our first decimal place, first DP. Okay, in this number we got a whole number, so you got a point over here, and in this number here we're not going to have a decimal place over here. So if you look over here now, there's no decimal place there, so we altogether we have 1. Now the rule is the number of decimal places we have in the question will be equal to the number of decimal places in the answer. Decimal places, okay, let's make that a bit more clear. Decimal places in the question will be equal to the decimal places in the answer. So this is the question. So we have, in our question, we have 1 decimal place in our question, so we should have 1 decimal place in our answer. That's the rule that helps us to put the decimal place in the right position in the answer. This rule here, count the number, or should be actually count the total number of decimal places in the question, and then we have a statement. The number of decimal places in the question will be equal to the number of decimal places in the answer. And in our example here, we had 1 decimal place in our question, which means we'll have 1 decimal place in our answer. Okay, now let's actually do the question. So we have over here, so we'll have 1 decimal place in the answer, so we'll put that in here. 7 times by 4 is 28. 6 times by 4 is 24. Add the 2 on the bottom gives us 26. So the answer there is 26.8. It looks like in this particular question I've actually lined up the decimal points as I've done in the previous exercises where we're adding and taking away decimal places, decimal numbers. Now this has lined up by the rule, not by me actually trying to line them up, and you will see in further examples where the decimal points don't line up at all because we're not following that rule. That rule only exists for when you're adding and taking away decimal numbers, or when we are dividing decimal numbers. At the moment we have, in this question here, okay, so in this particular question here, it looks like it's lined up. That's not a problem in itself. So let's do another question where you find out quite quickly they won't line up. So let's have a look at question number 37. So we have 7.2 multiplied by 1.2. Okay, here's the decimal question. Again, the rule says count the total number of decimal places in the question. Well, the total number of decimal places in the question is we got one decimal place here, one place, and we have one decimal place here. That's a decimal point. That's the first decimal place. So don't confuse because you got to see two dots. Okay, so that's your first DP, and that's another DP. So altogether we have in our question. So in our new question we have two decimal places altogether, because one here and one here. That gives a total of 2. So that means we will have in our new question 2 in the answer. So let's do that question on this side. So we have 7.2 multiplied by 1.2. Now because this is a 2-digit question, it's going to be a long multiplication question, so we can have more parts to it. So let's do the question in the traditional fashion of a long multiplication question. Now we have multiply everything by the first number. So 2 times by 2 is 4. 7 times by 2 is 14. Okay, trying to keep everything lined up as much as possible. Now because we're going to second line, we must add a 0 here. I always like to put a box and a 0 to show that I've artificially added it in. Now we multiply by the second digit. So now we are multiplying by the 1. So 2 times by 1 is 2. 7 times by 1 is 7. Okay, and like long multiplication questions, we need to now add up. So 4 add nothing is 4. 4 add 2 is 6. 1 add 7 is 8. Now here comes the important thing. Where does the decimal point go? According to the rule that we discussed in the beginning, our decimal point should go to give us 2 decimal places. So 1, 2. So our decimal point should go there. Now as I've said before, we are not trying to line up decimal points in multiplying questions. We are in adding, taking away and division, but not in this one. If they line up by the rule, that's fine. Otherwise we are not trying to force them into line as we do in addition, subtraction and division. So if you look over here now, you'll find out that the green ones are in this line, which is not in line with the red one. So it's actually, this decimal point is not in line with that. But that wasn't what I was trying to do. I'm following the rule. The rule says count the total number of decimal places, which I had 1 here and 1 here. That gave me 2. So I had 2 decimal places in my question. So that means I will have 2 in my answer. So 1, 2 has got to go here and not there. So 7.2 times by 1.2 gives me 8.64. And this is the beauty of the rule. If you follow the rule, you will get the decimal point always in the right position. Okay? Now, I've done 2 examples. One where the decimal point looks like it's lined up, because that's what the rule said. Second one where it says definitely not lined up, because lining up would mean going over here, but it's gone over there. It's gone over there because we made our statement. 2 decimal places in the question means 2 decimal places in the answer. So that's our answer. And some questions you'll have 3 decimal places. So if you have a look at another question now, drop this one off here. So we had, for example, 1.23 times by 4.5. Or if we have 0.65 times by 1.69. So if you look at these 2 questions here, we've got 2 decimal places here. We've got 1 decimal place there. And the question is count the total number of decimal places. Well, 2 add 1 will give us 3. So in this question, we've got 3 decimal places in the question. So we'll have 3 decimal places in the answer. In this one here we got 1, 2 decimal places, 1, 2, 2 decimal places, and 2 decimal places, add 2 decimal places will give us 4 decimal places in the question, which means we will have 4 decimal places in the answer. Okay, so I'll leave you with that for the moment, and now what I would like you to do is try the questions from exercise 10, page 60 from the basic skills book. Okay, and then to check on your answers, the answers, once you've got the book with you, the answers will be at the back of the book in the section to do with the chapter on decimals. Okay, right, that is the end of today's session. I hope this lesson has been of benefit to you, and I look forward to seeing you and welcoming you again to another lesson done by myself, Imran, one-to-one tutor, on my website one-to-one tutor.co.uk. Thank you very much. Okay.